Welcome back to Rob Schmitt Tonight. The complicit media has run cover for Biden since the moment he announced his run for president. We have a president right now who has absolutely no idea what his own foreign policy is. The words of this ailing and confused man could actually land us in a world war that could involve China and Russia. Here is Biden being asked on 60 Minutes last night whether or not his country, the United States, would defend Taiwan.
Would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
To be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion.
Yes.
That's a big statement. CBS says the White House walked back Biden's comments immediately after the interview. So the reality is this: Joe Biden is not running the country. Either he's so confused he can't remember his own country's military policy towards its number one threat, being China, or he disagrees with it and is being overruled by people like Ron Klain and Susan Rice. I'm not sure which one of those is worse. Newsmax's senior national security analyst Rick Grenell joins us here in the studio. Good to see you, Rick. What's your reaction to that?
First of all, we're in the studio.
Yeah, right.
Can we celebrate that for a second?
York, yeah.
Look, I think you just hit it spot on, is that what's the real answer? Does Joe Biden not know the policy, or does he disagree with it and then got overruled?
Right.
And if he got overruled by people that we're not watching and we can't confront, like Susan Rice and Ron Klain, it's a disaster. I think we've got to have accountability, and we don't have that accountability.
That's scary. I mean, there was a lot of things from that interview that were worrisome. You know,
look, I'm a diplomat. I try not to go into the military angle because I want to solve problems before we have wars. Right. And I think if you want to solve problems like before going into a war with nuclear weapons, a country with nuclear weapons, then you better have diplomats who are really tough and who don't back down. So I try to talk about the diplomacy angle, but for the President of the United States, you know, you got to have a credible threat of military action, but you also got to be honest about what the capabilities of the United States and what we would want to do if and then. I would not do a hypothetical. I think the reality is if someone said, would you do X, Y, and Z in the future, you just simply say, I'm not going to answer hypotheticals, but let me just tell you, the United States of America is the largest, most successful, and strongest country in the world. I mean, there's a way to say it without taking on a hypothetical, but that answer by Joe Biden, I think, is a real problem on many fronts.
Yeah, it is. Speaking of diplomacy, let's talk about some bad diplomacy here for a second. Democrats racing to return to the Iran nuclear deal and dump billions of dollars onto a very despicable government. 60 Minutes also interviewing Iran's president. Here's Ibrahim Raisi asked if he believes that the Holocaust ever even occurred.
Do you believe the Holocaust happened, that 6 million Jews were slaughtered?
There are
some signs that it happened. If so, they should allow it to be investigated and researched.
We're going to give he and a government that rules over a large population of people horribly. We're just going to dump more money onto them so that they can use it for proxy terror and all the other terrible things that they do.
Look, this morning on Newsmax, we interviewed the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama. And people should go look at that interview, because in that interview, he comes clean and he says, look, we know for sure that Iran did a cyber attack on Albania. Albania is a member of NATO. It's a cyber attack on one is a cyber attack on all of them. And yet, while Iran is clearly going after NATO members, we have a government, Joe Biden's government, which is trying to negotiate with this regime. This regime is a killer regime. They foment terror. They support terror. They are a human rights abuser. Why are we allowing this negotiation to even go on? In the Trump administration, we decided to put heavy sanctions on the Iranians. We really made them ostracized member of the international community. We pushed them to the side. It was working successfully, and yet Now we see the Biden administration really trying to push and be a part of this negotiation. I always say, you've heard me say it before, the opposite of America First is consensus with the Europeans.
Sure, that's exactly right. I want to talk about Germany for a second. Former ambassador to Germany, you were under Trump, facing a very brutal winter. The country is, after, of course, laughing in the face of your administration, becoming almost fully reliant on Russian energy. Even the German finance minister, Christian Lindner, is admitting that now is the absolute worst time to continue shutting down any power plants. What is happening right now in Germany, as far as you can tell, and what does this winter look like?
So I know Christian, and he leads the Libertarian Party. Yeah. The FDP, as it's called. And he wants to be a pro-business party. He wants to recognize that Germany is a manufacturing-based economy. You cannot have wind and solar and pretend like you're going to be able to run your manufacturing plants. Yeah. So the reality is, and I don't think many reporters here in America report on it, you've done a good job of highlighting Merkel and her decisions over 16 years of what she's done, what she did to stay in power. And this was a purely political move on the part of the Chancellor Merkel. In order to stay in power, she grabbed the Green Party issues. She got rid of the nuclear energy. She made a commitment to get rid of coal. You can't do that if you don't have energy sources. This is like California.
That's how it works different in Europe. You have a lot of these countries where you need to get the majority in that way, where you have to kind of bring on a party that has issues that you don't agree with at all, but you got to do them because you need to get a majority so you can get your stuff done.
You got to give to govern.
Yeah.
You got to stay in power, and so you got to bring in coalitions. It's a terrible situation, but it's the same with Gavin Newsom in California. Yeah. They're getting rid of the supply and squeezing people to say, keep conserving, whether it's water or energy.
Rick Grenell. Good to have you in the studio.
Yeah, nice
to see you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you so much.